welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. I think there's a few comments that I need to catch up with, but I'll obviously do so as soon as I am able to do so. Yeah, so as you can see, I wasn't required to work this Sunday, so I'm sharing it with you guys. So yes, it's Christmas leftovers time, or probably being a bit disingenuous to what I'm reviewing to call them leftovers. But so anyway, I'm just sharing one, hopefully last episode of the show for the year. I don't think I'll get a chance to cram in another one, but anyway, you never know. Yeah. What am I looking at today? Well, again, we're sort of focusing on independent bottlings again, as obviously I have a big fondness for the independent sector, and these are new releases, or relatively new releases, certainly new stuff that's come my way over the last few weeks. So I thought this would be a fitting end to the year, if this is indeed the last episode of the show for the year. Talking of which, the last time I looked at the subscriber count, we were at 1,992. So still there's the possibility of hitting 2,000 before the end of the year. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel as yet, please do so, because it would be really cool to get to that 2,000 figure. So yeah. Right, okay, so today what we're looking at, well, like I said, we'll be looking at some new independent stuff. We're starting off with a company called the Sailor's Home Company that seem to be set up to sort of bottle Irish whiskey. Now, I don't know anything at all about the brand or the company or anything like that. Their website is another one of those kind of slick websites that's really sort of, well, all right, it goes on and on about their concept of the of sailing and all this kind of stuff, but there's really very little actual information, if you know what I mean. As far as I can tell, they're an independent bottling company, therefore I'm guessing that they source their juice from the usual suspects, one would imagine. But of course, it's all very non-transparent, or should I say it's all rather opaque. That would be a better way of saying it, wouldn't it? Again, this is the big issue that people have with the whole Irish whiskey industry. This opacity, this lack of information, almost kind of like not wanting to say where their juice is coming from. And I don't see why that should be an issue at the end of the day, but for some people it obviously is. So like I said, I can tell you practically nothing at all about this company. You can have a look on their website. I mean, and like I said, it's all very slick and corporate and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, and the second of the two independent bottling companies we'll be looking at is a company called, or say a range called Fable Whisky, which is produced by a company called Pendulum Spirits Limited. Now, again, don't really know a great deal about the company itself, and again, it's a very slick website, and I kind of quite like the concept, I suppose. I mean, it's apparently all based around, or this set of releases is all based around the fable of the Ghost Piper of Clanard Bay. I don't know the story, but what they've done is it's apparently a story from the southwest coast of Scotland, close to Stranraer. Now, you know, and they apparently collaborated with an artist by the name of Hugo Queller. Again, don't know the chap, to create this range. And what they've done is they've done bottlings based on elements of the stories, and they're apparently planning to release 11 chapters. I think they've done 8 so far. I've got kindly was sent samples of 2 of them, and they appeal to me. I love that kind of that imagery. It's slightly dark. It's, you know, probably about 1 million miles away from the sort of imagery of boutique whiskey and people like that, you know, the sort of funky stuff. It's got a real kind of darkness to it, and yeah, I really liked it. And so, you know, asked the distributors, Highball Brands, if they kindly send me some samples, which they sent me a couple of. So I thought that was really good of them. So also Highball Brands are the distributors for the Sailor's Home as well. So big thank you to them for the samples for this week's episode. And the final independent bottling company is not a new one. I've done an episode of the show on them before, the Sipping Shed. I've got 2 new releases from them, and what I love about what Dan is doing with his releases is that he's not rushing them out. I mean, 5 releases I think this year is pretty conservative, it has to be said. But I like what he's doing, and one of the bottlings that we'll be looking at is an Ardmore. Now this is the 3rd batch from this particular barrel. The first batch he released as a, I think it was a 9-year-old. And that was Oloroso finished. Then it was released, I think, as a 10, which was essentially from the bourbon cask. And now the 3rd release from that particular cask has been finished in XPX. Pedro Ximenez spent a year in the PX cask, so bottled at 12 years old. So like I said, it's doing something a little bit different. I mean, we had an email conversation about a possible future release, you know, and he was saying it was a fresh bourbon cask, quite an active one, and he was going to bottle half of it. And I said, you know, you're a bit concerned that, you know, that the second half of the cask would just take up far too much wood. And he said, well, we'll keep an eye on it and see how it goes. So yeah, so if you want a second opinion on that, Dan, you know, and if you're watching, you know, you feel free to ping me a sample before you decide to bottle it. And that goes for any independent bottling companies if they want a completely and utterly unbiased opinion on their bottling. Then I'm obviously I'm more than happy to help out, shall we say. So anyway, I think that's enough waffle. I'm getting a little bit dry, but I still need to tell you about the actual physical lineup. So I'll do that before I start tasting. Okay, so I'm going to do them in order of the 3 independent bottling companies. I'm going to kick off with the 2 Irish, which seems sensible to me. The first bottling we have here is called the Haven. It is a triple pot still distilled spirit, so a mash of malted and unmalted barley, and including some oats apparently. Doesn't carry an age statement, is bottled at 43% and has been matured in a combination of bourbon and Oloroso casks. Second bottling we'll be looking at is the 10-year-old Irish whiskey called the Horizon. Again, bottled at 43%. This is an Irish whiskey. Didn't state whether it was a pot still or not, but it's been aged in ex-bourbon casks and finished for an unspecified amount of time in ex-Barbados rum casks. So could be interesting. And now on to the 2 Fable bottlings. The first one we'll be looking at is called Moon, and this was chapter 3. It is a single Dailuaine cask number Bourbon Hoggy 307147, distilled in May of 2008, bottled in May of this year at the not inconsiderable ABV of 59.9%. I have the butt just off stage, as they say. The second bottling from that Fable whiskey is called Piper. It was chapter 6. Again, a single bourbon hoggy of Glen, Elgin, hogshead number 80406, distilled in January of 2014, bottled in August of 2021, and it is 7 years old and 61.6%. Yeah, that's pretty hefty stuff. So water is standing by, and this seems to be the way at the moment. I mean, the bottlings are pretty high in their alcohol content because there's no let up with the 2 from the Sipping Shed. So the first one we'll be looking at is an Altmore. It's a refill sherry cask, 11-year-old, cask number 9019. It was distilled in May of 2010, bottled this year at 61.3%. My God, I'll be on the bloody floor by the time I get to the end of this little lot. And the final bottling of the day will be the second of the Sipping Shed bottlings. This is an Ardmore, as I mentioned earlier. This is batch number 3 from cask 1313. It was distilled in 2009, bottled in 2021, this particular batch, 12 years old. Like I said, 1 year finishing in ex Pedro Ximenez cask. Don't know whether they were what size cask that was, but I would guess smaller casks. Obviously it's a third of the, you know, the juice, and it is bottled at 51.9%. Hallelujah, something less than 60. Anyway, so I think this is going to be an interesting tasting, and like I said, I'll probably be scraping myself up off the floor by the end of it, but God, the things I do for you guys. Anyway, let's kick off with a bit of Irish then, shall we? Right, okay, so kicking off with the Haven. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Young, raw, fainty. I mean, that really is probably, I mean, what's that, 3 years old in a day, possibly? I mean, there's a bit of banana-y fruit, there's a bit of pot still spice, and maybe there's a little bit of an oatiness there, but it's really hard to see past all the feints. It's just really oily, fainty, and it's just been bottled far too soon. And considering that this would hit the shelves at 45 quid, I mean, well, I'd be expecting a bit more than this. I have to say. I mean, the quality of the spirit is definitely there. It's just been, like I said, bottled way too soon. See what pass out. Young, oily. It's pretty much the nose. There's maybe a little bit more fruit on the palate, a little bit more of that banana-iness. It's short. It's got a nice spiciness at the finish, but it's short. It's a bit masked. And yeah, you can argue that, well, I mean, if that was bottled at 46%, I mean, the finish would be even shorter, it has to be said. Yes, the alcohol is kind of just sort of like, you know, pushing those spices up. It's a slight odd perfume note right on the aftertaste, which is sort of just jarring a little bit. And so, you know, conclusion is that this was bottled far too young. I mean, if this had been bottled at 46%, it would have been sort of shorter and hotter on the finish. I mean, it's hot enough as it is, to be fair with you. So overall, I'm not really loving this particular bottling. Like I said, the spirit quality is good. It's just been bottled far too young. Right, okay, so let's move on to the second bottling. So I don't think we can accuse this of being bottled too young, because it has an age statement, it's 10 years old. And 52 quid-ish. Let's see what the nose gives us. Grainy. Very grainy, very austere. Guessing from that, this is either 100% grain, Irish grain whiskey, or it's a grain heavy blend. There's a bit of vanilla, there's a little bit of wood smoke. Getting a touch of banana skin possibly, maybe some tropical fruit. But again, it's the sort of the grainy, austere grain that's kind of the focal point here. And although it's not been bottled too young, again, you know, young, and it is young grain, if there is a proportion of grain in this bottling, just doesn't really have a great deal of character, as we well know. You know, grain whiskey really needs to be left for about 20 odd years before it starts to develop any real character. And so it's kind of, again, it's not a bad whiskey, but it's just a sort of like a, you know, Let's see what the pass on. Again, taut, grainy, a little bit austere, a little bit more vanilla oak coming through on the mid palate. There's a touch of a toastiness, which is kind of attempting to balance up that sort of austerity. It just carries on as grainy. I mean, it really, like I said, this is either 100% grain whiskey, which it doesn't say, or maybe I've missed something somewhere. I did have a look. Or it's a grain heavy blend, it has to be said. There's a little bit of spice on the finish, a little, yeah, almost verging on the chilliness. Little bit longer than the Haven, but still, it's nothing really to write home about. And there are quite a lot of Irish whiskies and Irish whiskey brands out on the market at the moment, and there are a lot more that I prefer, shall we say. Like I said, quality, I've got, you know, the quality is good. Like I said, don't know where it came from. I'd guess it probably Cooley, maybe, I don't know. That does seem to be where most of it comes from. It's either me Cooley or Bushmills, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? Don't think it's Bushmills. But anyway, that is a kind of almost an irrelevance, although one would like to know. But yeah, I'm going to move on. Okay, so let's move on to the first of the two Fable bottlings. I have high hopes for these, as like I said, I'm really enamoured with the labelling, the artwork. But as we well know, and as I say in God knows how many times, labelling, backstories, frippery, it's all really at the end of the day irrelevance, because it's how good is the juice in the glass, and well, we're now going to find out, aren't we? So yeah, this is a 12-year-old Dailuaine. Ooh, sulphur city. And we're not talking sherry sulphur either. This is spirit sulphur. Raw, fainty. You know, it's not good. I mean, you know, chapter 3 is one to pass over, I think, in the book. This is the problem. Dailuaine is a sort of an oily, heavy, sulphury, new make spirit kind of whiskey, which needs time. And you would have thought 12 years old, it would have had long enough. But I'm guessing the problem is that this was filled into a pretty well used cask. Well, in my opinion, I think what they should have done, I mean, you could have left this for donkey's years and it probably would have still retained some of the faintiness, so I would have re-racked this into a slightly more active cask. Well, I would have done that several years ago probably, because it's raw, it's sulphury, and yeah, I'm certainly not loving this one. See what the palate's like. Yeah, raw, fainty, oily. There's maybe some fruit lurking there somewhere, but it's kind of difficult to see past the faints and the sulphur. It's a hot finish, it really is. Yeah, I'm struggling with this one, it has to be said. Let's put a little drop of water with it, see if that actually mitigates this particular whiskey. Like I said, I mean, the quality is probably there. I mean, it's just like I said, it's been matured in a practically inert bloody cask, and it's really done it no favours whatsoever. Right, okay, so putting a drop of water is actually brought out a little bit of orange, sort of tangerine fruit. It's still a bit on the raw side, but it's less fainty and less sulphury now. I'm also getting a little bit of vanilla oak. So kind of, I guess water has sort of saved the day with this particular bottling. See what the power's on there. It's a bit nondescript, it's a bit watery, it's a bit sugar water. And this is the big problem I've found over the years with relatively young spirit, in inverted commas, that's bottled at cask strength and it just hasn't removed the overt impurities. You stick some water with it and it just kind of like falls apart. It's not the fault of the spirit, it's just basically it's just not matured enough. And this is, I think, is a salutary lesson, that whisky is, casks of whisky are a living creature, and they will be ready when they're ready. But sometimes you need to give them a little bit of a push, and I'm sure this must have been nosed and tasted several times over the years. Well, I'm assuming before it was bottled, and I'm surprised that whoever passed this off as being good for bottling did so, because on this evidence it wasn't really ready. And like I said, if you wanted to get this bottled, stick it into maybe a virgin oak cask, a refill sherry cask, just something that was just a bit more active, the cynics would say shove it in a sherry cask and mask the faintiness. I personally would say, well, just give it a little bit more time in an active cask. That I think was a real disappointment. Okay, so let's move on to Piper. This is, like I said, a 7-year-old Glen Elgin. I really hope this is going to be better. I mean, I don't like being critical, but it's my job at the end of the day. I am a reviewer, and yes, you could argue that maybe I shouldn't actually review these bottlings. If you can't say something good about a whiskey, then don't say anything at all. It's a very apt thing to say, I suppose. But the point is that I'd like to think that all the comments I've made about why I don't think these are particularly great whiskies so far have been very, very fair. And it's not like I'm just basically saying, well, that's a crap whiskey, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Anyway, I'm going to shut up and stick my nose in the glass of the Glen Elgin. Now that's nice, actually. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of an alcohol prickle. I mean, it is a little bit on the raw side. It is only 7 years old. But part of me, basically, when I saw this, it was like, well, Glen Elgin is very consistent in the quality. And, it gets away with being bottled relatively young. There's some barley, juicy apricot, apple, pear, bit of straw. It's actually quite straw-like. And that's got that kind of raw barley, husky kind of nose to it. You can smell the alcohol. I mean, this really does actually need some water. But it's not bad. And hallelujah, that's all I can say. See what the pals want. God, whoa, that's an intensely alcoholic finish. But it's not unbalanced, it's not hot. There's some lovely sort of silky, soft, smooth vanilla oak, apricot, apple, juicy, contained juiciness. The alcohol is kind of keeping it all in check. Straw-like barley. Again, all right, you can argue it's not hugely complex, but it's good for a 7-year-old whiskey. It's good. Glen Elgin, like I said, is a lovely spirit, and yes, you can get away with bottling it at this young age. So let's stick a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Juicy, young, fresh, juicy citrus, fresh fruit. Again, slightly straw-like, a little bit more vanilla oak, a little bit more creaminess, plenty of barley, white fruit. That's a delightful nose. That's a lovely nose. It's quite complex in reality for its age, and I like that. I think that's really good. I mean, you know, it's I forget what it's on the shelf at, and you know, although as you well know, I'm not allowed to say anything about the company I work for, but if I did, I would say that it's on the shelf in Shea Aultmore. Yeah, I like it. Water is definitely needed with this. So pass on. That softened it out nicely. So by mitigating some of that alcohol, you're getting the creamy oak coming through now. Lovely sort of dusting of caster sugar on the fruit. Again, apricots, white fruit, a little bit of spice. Good length, actually. I mean, for a 7-year-old whiskey, that's actually got some good length to it, some good complexity. All right, it's not sort of like the most complex whiskey on the face of the planet, but it's got a good enough complexity for its age. That was lovely. That was really good. So all I can say is hallelujah, that has saved the Fable. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Sipping Shed Aultmore. Another bit of a alcoholic monster, but let's see what the nose gives us on this. So this is like I said, refill sherry cask. Very sherried, edgy, herbal, almost tight Oloroso dried fruit, sultana, orange, apricot, a little bit of sugar as well. Coffee tannin, not getting a great deal of distillery character, it has to be said, but touch of menthol, bit of spice. I mean, all right, yep, you like your sherried whiskies. This is certainly gonna sort of tick all your boxes. I'm, as you well know, a tad ambivalent about this kind of spirit. I can see its place. I can see that there are people that like it. To me, it's just a little bit too heavy on the sherry. You know, if I've got my retailer's hat on, I suppose, you know, I need a few of these kind of whiskies on the shelf. And, you know, it's good clean sherry, no sulphur. It's, you know, got enough maturity to sort of be interesting. But again, I'm getting no kind of Altmore character, and you know, I'm not getting any maltiness, I'm not getting any spirit character. It's pretty much all about the sherry cask. So for me, yeah, let's see what that's like. Clean, no sulphur, good start. Edgy, alcoholic, tannic, dried fruit, a little bit of a maltiness on the finish. Maybe I'm being a bit disingenuous and saying that there's no real distillery character. Yeah, maybe I'm getting some maltiness right on the finish. It was fleeting, it has to be said. Pleasantly spiced. Again, really heavy on the sherry, pretty alcoholic, no real finish. Definitely is going to need a little drop of water, I can tell you. So I shall do just that and see what happens. Right, okay, so it's less herbal, it's less edgy, it's less raw. There's a little bit more sweetness coming through now, a little bit more citrus as well. Touch of oxidised fruit. Bit of vanilla maybe. Okay, it's kind of lessened that kind of raw kind of sherry feel. Still not sort of going to sort of jump up and down and you know, make a big fuss about it, but you know, it is what it is. It's clean. It's impressive in that respect. So we'll pass on then. Did I get a bit of tea leaf then? Yep, did. Okay, let's palate. Softer, juicier, more of that sort of raisinated sultana kind of fruit. Lots of I don't get that kind of slightly meaty sort of spirit element now, unfortunately. Still quite tannic, but the tannins are relatively soft. It's like I said, it's emphasising the juiciness of the Oloroso fruit, and knocking the alcohol is kind of like sort of, by knocking that down, is kind of not emphasising so much the spice and the tannin, which is a good thing in this respect, because it's a bit longer as well. Is pleasant. I mean, like I said, it's not my favourite style of whiskey, as you well know, but it's a good sherry cask at the end of the day. So Dan has picked well, and you know, there's going to be a lot of people that like that. Me, you know, not quite so so enamoured, but you know, that's me. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Ardmore. So batch number 3, 1 year in XPX cask. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Intense, balsamic, smoky, treacly, meaty, malty, peaty. What's not to like? Yeah, okay, so you can argue the sherry's a little bit heavy, but you know, all things considered, I think it's working its way quite nicely. Peat and sherry does work together quite well, it has to be said, so you can't argue that it's not showing distillery character, because it certainly is. Yeah, I kind of quite like that. It's got a smoky bacon kind of note coming through now. It's kind of just a sort of whiskey to have with breakfast. Even though it is, well, it's not that heavy, is it? It's only 51.9%. You know, it's a bit of a weakling, really, isn't it? Yeah, you can have that with your bacon and your beans, and well, I would anyway. Are you trying to say I'm an alcoholic? Yeah, okay, I like it. It's kind of, you know, it doesn't quite have quite some. I mean, I've come across some of Ardmores that are really quite funky and cabbagey, and this is a kind of a bit more tame, shall we say, by Ardmore standards. Do you know, it makes me, you know, I was tasting the Legacy, the Ardmore distillery bottling the other week. Dear God, is it really disappointing at the end of the day? I mean, you know, Ardmore is making some great spirit, and there's a lot of it about in the independent sector at the moment, and it really does wee all over the distillery bottling. Distillery bottling is pants in comparison. I mean, it's kind of better than what it was. It's bottled at 40%. It's always on bloody offer in the supermarkets, and it's just very dull. This is not dull by any stretch of the imagination. This has got loads and loads of character. See what it pass on. Again, lots of raisinated cherry fruits, but it's full, it's meaty, it's got some lovely peat character, spice, vanilla. Look, really meaty, it's, you know, smoked bacon again. Plenty of dried fruit, good length. I mean, that's good. I mean, you know, I didn't have the opportunity, unfortunately, to taste all 3 of the bottlings. I didn't taste bottling number 1 or batch number 1 from this. I tasted number 2, which I thought was really good. And this is good. I mean, you know, I'm not a sherry hater. Sherry in the right proportion with the right spirit works really well, and you know, I think in this instance it's certainly doing its job really quite nicely because it's peat sherry. You know, the distillery character is evident. You know, although only maybe part of the distillery character, should we say? But anyway, oh, that's better. Right, that's kind of lessened the sherry character. I'm getting more American oak, I'm getting sweet, creamy American oak, apricot, barley, less peat as well. So this is kind of like a sort of pick your poison kind of bottling. Do you have it neat when you get intense sherry, intense peat, or do you put a little drop of water with it and get less intense sherry, less intense peat, a bit more barley character? Either way, I'm actually really enjoying this. This is lovely. See what the pass on. Again, more barley, more creamy American oak, less sherry, less peat as well to a certain extent. It's juicier. I mean, the peat is kind of almost kind of smoky now. It's kind of lessened in its intensity. It does come through on the finish. I like that. I think it's got a real. That's what I want, I guess, from an independent single cask bottling. You know, I want the fact that it is a kind of. It does change dramatically when you put some water with it. And it's basically a case of if you want to drink it neat, fine, you will get this character. Put a little drop of water with it, you'll get this. And this is what I think where single cask bottlings really win, because they have this versatility to them. And I, for one, really enjoyed that. And yep, it's on the shelf, shall we say. So. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. So big thank you to Highball Brands and to the Sipping Shed for today's samples. That's really very much appreciated. The Sailor's Home, yeah, okay, I'm really not going to get behind it. I mean, I think I said all that I needed to say, you know, as I was tasting them. They are, both of them, a little bit disappointing. They could have been a whole lot better. Well, the first bottling, the Haven, certainly could have been better if it had been either left a bit longer or aged in slightly more active casks. And the Horizon, well, could have done with being having a bit more malt content. I mean, but then again, if it was an entire grain whiskey, you would say, yeah, okay, fair enough. The Fable whiskey, yeah, okay, I loved the concept, loved the artwork, really didn't love that Dailuaine. I mean, that Dailuaine again just suffered from the fact that it was matured in a cask that was doing it no favours whatsoever. Thankfully, the Glen Elgin was good. I mean, you know, if that is more indicative of what they're bottling, and I must admit I've not tasted the other bottlings in the range, so I couldn't comment on those. But if that is more indicative of what they're bottling, then they're going to be bottling some really good stuff, and worth looking out for the other bottles in the range, apart from the Dailuaine. The Sipping Shed, like I say, big fan of what Dan is doing. All right, okay, so the Altmore was good if you like big, chunky sherried whiskies. Didn't really float my boat so much as the Ardmore. Loved the Ardmore. Great whiskey, and just showed how versatile single cask bottlings are, you know. And this is really where whiskey is at. This is why I love the independents, because of this pick your poison kind of point. Do you drink it neat and get this kind of character? Do you put a little drop of water with it and get this character? That's what I want. I want interesting whiskey, and unfortunately there's a lot of whiskey that is not interesting. It's bottled at 40%, 43%, and it really, I think the whiskey industry really needs a good prod up the backside with a sharp stick, because it really needs to change some of its practices. Okay, if that means the prices of whiskey are going to go up a little bit more, then so be it. But you know, I think less than 46% chill filtering, caramel colouring, etc., 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 really should be consigned to history. And you know, you're not going to convince me that sort of those kind of practices are producing a good end spirit. They're just basically all about money at the end of the day. But anyway, that's this week's episode of The Show in the Bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you have a lovely Christmas. I hope Santa, or you know, the whoever's sticking the white beard on, has brought you, or going to bring you, a lovely whiskey. And like I said, you know, if you're going to buy a bottle of whiskey, buy it from Gauntlets, because you know you're going to get a good bottle of whiskey. You know. Anyway, until the next year, good dramming and good afternoon.